Hello and welcome once again to episode 11 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name once again is Dimitri and I'll be your host for this episode. And I'm joined today by my fellow completionists, Fernando
Hello, hello.
and Ben.
Hey, hey.
So it's once again that time of year for Apple events. Not too long ago, we just did one of these episodes, but it's the whole season apparently. And we figured we'd discuss some of the announcements from the high-speed event. So did you all know that the iPhone has 5G?
I think he may have mentioned it once or twice. I actually saw like a supercut on Twitter earlier today of someone who
It was just all the 5Gs.
all the 5Gs, yeah, and I got to probably like 45 Gs and I stopped watching because it was just too much.
I mean, I certainly felt that while watching it. There was the 5G segment, and then they just kept on bringing home that it has 5G. It has 5G. It has
Yeah.
5G. It has 5G.
In case you weren't aware, it has 5G.
So this is so for those that don't know, 5G is like the new standard that's coming out for wireless connectivity, and it provides very fast speeds that you probably don't need. The example that they showed with like 7 streams of video playing, that was 7 streams of very small video that could have happened perfectly fine on LTE, even crappy LTE. So I don't understand why they're pushing this 5G thing so much. I have a feeling carriers are very much involved in that decision.
Yeah. Not to mention.
Well, did you
Oh, go ahead.
go Ben? Yeah.
Not to mention that that not only do you maybe not need it, but you probably won't get it. At least, so from the United States perspective, I looked this up. I wanted to kind of learn more about what is likely to happen. And I live in Florida, and I'm on Verizon. That's my carrier. And they, for example, they announced at the event, the CEO of Verizon was on stage with Tim Cook, which I thought was very strange, but it is what it is. He announced that they were taking 5G nationwide, and that all across the United States, they were turning on their 5G network for every single Verizon customer. It's like over 200 million people or whatever, and that we all have 5G now. Except what he means by that asterisk is that the 5G network, sort of the general use of it or whatever is available, but the specific technology that makes really high speed possible, which is wave, is only available in 35 of those markets, cities basically, and that they were going to, I think, advance to like 60 cities by the end of the year. So really what he meant by nationwide coverage was actually, well, 30 cities plus a few more by the end of the year. And I actually watched an MKBHD video where he explained 5G. This is last year, and he actually drove to, I think it was like Rhode Island, which was the nearest place where there was a 5G tower, and he literally stood right next to the pole where the tower, little mini like cell was, and he tried out a brand new phone with 5G, an Android phone, and yeah, it got like close to 2 gigabits, I think, down, which is insane for a cell phone. But he actually went about 75 feet down the street and kind of just around the corner of a building that was right next to that tower, and the speeds dropped precipitously down to like 200 megs, which is still way faster in general than what you get with your phone today. But I think the sort of hype around like, oh, we're going to have gigabit speeds everywhere all the time permanently, it's the new normal, that is, not only is that not true today, I don't think it's going to be true for probably years at this point.
I agree. And you were saying, Dimitri, about the carriers. John Gruber posted the $30 price hike. Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
About the iPhone Mini, I guess. So I mean, this whole release was a little bit more carrier heavy than others. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like
And
the
I wonder
days
if
of like Singular, like when they were like the Singular CEOs on stage.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that $30 is specific to the 5G hardware for the millimeter wave in the US, because Europe is not getting that specific hardware. They're getting the general 5G, which is what AT&T and T-Mobile and most other carriers have. And it's only Verizon that has the ultra wideband, which is the very fine spectrum that does not pass through objects very well, including your hand. Like, I'm just waiting for another Tenagate thing to start. It's like, I'm not getting my 2 gigabit speeds. So I wonder if that $30 is specific to that hardware, and if it's at all related to the Qualcomm deals where they need to price like an additional price on top of the existing price of the hardware for the cellular connectivity, and it's like a percentage of the hardware rather than the other way around where it's just like a fixed component price. Like, I don't know if you've ever read into that and as to why iPads with cellular are, for whatever reason, $130 more. Well, it's because of that percentage increase from including that hardware as a part of the licensing. So I
It's
wonder if
not
that's
only
the same
that.
deal. Well,
Right?
no, it's that plus Apple's margins. But if Apple didn't need to charge any more for it, they would probably just include it in everything for simplicity,
No,
right?
I
If
disagree.
you
I
have one
disagree.
board,
Do you remember the white and black MacBooks? The
Yeah, where the
MacBooks.
black was $100 more
Just because
for
it was
different
black.
plastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I see your point, and I think I agree mostly with it, Dimitri.
But interesting that if you
So
look at the phones, right? Like everybody's like, "Oh, what's this weird little like panel on the side of the new iPhone?" And people were thinking, "Oh, it's a pencil holder or it's a who knows Touch ID sensor." It's actually just it's a radio window for the Wave to be able to get out of the case so that it can communicate with the tower. And if you look at the European iPhone 12s that are coming out, those product shots, it doesn't have that window. So like you said, Dimitri, it's not just that the radio's not there. Because the radio's not there, they then literally changed the case design as well because they don't need that window. They and
Interesting.
I mean, I'm sure if they don't need it, they're not gonna sort of make the phone look uglier by having a window that they don't need.
So interestingly enough, that window goes right where my fleshy palm just naturally sits. So I wonder how well this is going to work.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to precariously hold your phone like this to
No,
allow
Dimitri,
it
it's
to get its
specifically for
signal.
lefties. That's what they did. That's for me. Finally, something for me. It's for lefties.
We'll give bumpers to everyone. Don't worry, Dimitri.
Well, no, it won't pass through the bumper this time.
Oh.
Okay. So as far as things other than 5G, if we actually go in order of the event, we started with the HomePod Mini. So Fernando, you mentioned, I don't remember if it was online or offline, that you didn't want any smart devices in your home. What makes you think the HomePod Mini is a better, less smart device that is qualified?
I mean, it does run Siri, so clearly it's a less smart device.
Exactly. Yeah. Siri can't even understand me when I'm trying to interact with her. So, no, I don't think. I think I'm. This is the point where if I had said I will eat my hat before I get one one of those HomePods, I would be right here with you guys with my hat already boiled and ready to go. Because the price is just too good. I hate it. But I'm at least going to get one. It's very cute, and it's obviously going to have amazing sound. So it's just me eating my words. Not much else.
And intercom also makes it, I think, interesting, right? If you have more
Agreed.
than one, it does create kind of an interesting little value add there.
And also the fact that it has, did they even publicly say if it had a U1 chip? I don't remember if that was just rumors or if
I don't think it has the S5. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
They did say that.
So
Yeah.
it has
which
that.
does not naturally have a U1 because that was last year's watch.
Right. So I'm not sure if they actually said anything. Because one thing we heard, right, was that it was going to maybe have the U1 chip so that it could do things like track you throughout your house carrying your phone around. And then it could do things like if you walk into a room that has a HomePod, it knows that you're in that room, and then it can like turn the lights on in that room, for example, with HomeKit. That was a rumor. I don't think there was any sort of solid evidence in the presentation that shows that that's true.
Because one feature that they brought up was that it can have improved handoff, where basically as you walk room to room, the sound will follow.
Yeah.
So I don't know
So the
if
answer is
that's
yes.
making use.
The answer is yes. I just checked the tech specs, and they do have an ultra wideband chip that requires a U1 equipped iPhone for it to work.
Nice.
Okay.
So I don't think they announced it, but they do have it in there.
Okay, so that's clearly what's making that work, because there was also a comparison table between the HomePod Classic 2018 edition. If you look at the URL, it's literally HomePod-2018, which feels old. So they had a comparison table, and they didn't mention anything about the HomePod, about this feature at all, where you have this improved handoff where you can walk around and the sound would follow. So I was wondering, like, was that specific to the HomePod Mini? Was that coming to the newer HomePod? Was that relying on the U1 chip? And I think since you did clarify that, that it must be using that U1 chip.
So I guess the question is, how does that work with the HomePod like Classic? Does that one have
I guess
the
I
chip?
guess you wouldn't get that feature
Right.
because
I
it's not even on
agree.
that table. So
I agree.
Okay. So I guess if you're playing
so
on a HomePod and then you walk into a room with a HomePod Mini, it would transfer. But then maybe if you go the other direction, back into the room that has the regular HomePod, it would just stay on the Mini because it wouldn't realize that you had gotten close to the HomePod Classic.
so I guess you need to get multiple HomePod Minis, Fernando.
Yeah,
Damn you, Apple.
I literally heard people say like I'm gonna get one for every room, which
That's what I'm thinking. I don't know, like it's crazy, but that's what I'm thinking. I just moved a total 180. Like
yeah.
you guys would get whiplash if you were in the car with me.
Well, I have friends who have various kinds of Amazon smart devices, and they so like the bigger ones and then they make those little tiny ones that are much cheaper, and they're like, I'll just put one in every room, put one in the bathroom, put one in the shower, put one in the living room, in the bedroom, like you just have them everywhere.
Yeah.
And then they can just sort of shout at the nearest lady in a can, and she'll just respond and do what you ask.
Janet.
That's what I actually have set up with the regular HomePod. So in each of our main rooms where we have like HomeKit lights installed, we have a HomePod just so that way we can say, "Hey, turn on the lights," and it would turn on the lights in that room. Now, a ironic side effect of this is if the HomePod is not the thing that hears you, if it's like your AirPods or if it's your watch or phone or iPad, it has no clue what room you're in. So it's like, oh, let me turn on the lights for you, which is lights throughout the house.
Oh.
So I haven't seen that. I like that still happens, especially when you have HomePod AirPods in. But the fact that there is now a HomePod Mini like makes me feel like, oh, maybe it's okay if I just stick more of these in other rooms, like the bathroom, for instance.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, like,
it would
you're
previously
already a
be
fan?
like stupid to have a HomePod in there.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say you're already a fan. What about you, Dimitri? Are you gonna get a few minutes?
So not immediately, but I am looking forward to once I finally add HomeKit support to the lights in my bathrooms, for instance, then to just stick a mini on top of the mirror or something
Right.
away from moisture because I don't feel like that's safe.
Yeah.
And they did.
Siri,
I don't think
Siri
they
electrocuted me.
that's an integration you don't want. They did also announce that I don't think they announced it maybe during the keynote, but we did find out that you can do a stereo pair with them, just like you can with the full size HomePod. So you will be able to do that. You can also pair it with an Apple TV, so that if you want to use the speakers as kind of your TV speakers, you can do that. And so it seems like from that perspective, there's not much difference if you're going to use it in that use case from the big HomePod, other than that. This one they're going to be smaller, so they're not going to maybe quite have the same like audio presence in the room, but that they are, and there are literally fewer speakers in the Mini than there are in the big one. But other than that,
just 3, right?
Yeah, but other than that, it seems like the functionality is pretty similar.
That said, this wasn't announced or anything, but it was made available on their website. The HomePod is actually getting an update that the HomePod Mini will not get, and that is spatial audio via Dolby Atmos. So because it has those 7 speakers, when you have a pair of them connected to an Apple TV, they will now be able to use those speakers independently to give spatial sound. And not only that, in iOS 14.2, I think, there's a new setting to permanently set a HomePod's pair as the speakers for an Apple TV, so you no longer have to like manually set it, which is currently what you would need to do every time it forgets it. So I think that bundled with each other will make the HomePods, like the classic one, the de facto like speaker that you can get for your Apple TV to really elevate the experience.
Right. Yeah, they mentioned something about like home theater mode, which they didn't really expand upon at all. But I guess it's that, right? That's what it is. Nice.
Okay, so other than the HomePods, we got plenty more announcements. There was the AirTags, there was the new Apple TV 8K, and there was none of that. So like we kind of just got the HomePod and we just got an iPhone. So that was it for this year. I mean, there's nothing else new, right?
I mean, the iPhone itself, I feel like, is a pretty meaty topic. But yeah, it was definitely the case that I think had those other rumors not been quite as persistent, I think maybe people would have been generally a little bit more excited about the iPhone announcements that were made. It does feel very... I don't know about you guys, but from my experience of kind of seeing other people talk about this on places like Twitter, um, it seems very kind of hot and cold about whether people liked this set of announcements and these devices that were announced and stuff or not. And it seems like some people are super jazzed and really excited about it and anticipate, eagerly anticipating receiving their new phones. And some of the people are like, "Meh, I'm not even going to upgrade. Like, it's not even that exciting." So it's interesting. That is always true, I think, to a degree, but it seems stronger this year. Like that polarization seems stronger.
I don't know
Definitely.
if I agree.
Yeah.
Like I think it's more like every single year it's like again. They
Yeah.
barely did anything new. I'm not gonna upgrade. I have my trusty 4G phone here because I hate 5G. Like who wants 5G? And then the next year is like, oh yeah, I love 5G. I've always loved 5G.
Mm-hmm.
Basically a
I
bunch
don't
of
know what you're talking
Fernandos.
about. I have 5GE right now. Like, I don't need new
It's just as
5G,
good,
right? There's
right?
5GE on my
I
phone.
heard that it's just as good.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, 5GE is a silly marketing thing that AT&T did in the United States, where
Oh,
it's
right.
5G evolution, and I guess the E means that they can lie. I don't know, but essentially they change a bunch of people's little carrier signals on their phones to say 5GE on it to give you the impression that they've just like magically upgraded your phone to have 5G all of a sudden. It's not true. It's just a change. They get to control what that little thing says, and they changed it. And it's just LTE. There's really no difference in what you're actually getting as far as quality or speed. They just changed it because they can, I guess. I don't know.
Do either of you remember that P-Cell thing that came out that was like announced a few years ago? I believe one of the like senior VP software people at Apple like went and joined it. That's why like the Apple Sphere knew about it. Do you know
I
about P-Cell?
I don't remember that at all.
Okay,
No.
so P-Cell was a technology where it would use beamforming from the antennas
Mm-hmm.
to like make a private cellular network for your phone that was accurately positioned exactly where your phone was. So
Wow.
you get an uninterrupted connection essentially
Right.
that doesn't have anyone else on it. And they did this by putting essentially an antenna every few feet,
Mm-hmm.
and you just wire the place with antennas,
Right.
and then they're going to use beamforming between them to individually address like individual devices in space. And the way this worked, it didn't use any special hardware. It was capable of using Wi-Fi, LTE, any traditional radio, basically, and it would directly find where the device is. And I looked it up, and it's apparently still like it's a real thing now. Like you can buy the antennas and wire up your building for it. And like LTE, when it came out, it promised very good speeds for the
Mm-hmm.
most part. Like I really don't see why we need to jump onto 5G so much when we can get more out of the existing technology that we have. But I guess I should look forward to it because as once everyone goes onto 5G, you can turn off 5G on your phone, and LTE would be like fantastic.
Yeah.
The same way 3G currently is, right?
Right.
You just turn off LTE when you have like no signal. It says 4 bars, but can't connect to anything. Turn it off and then use 3G, and you can all of a sudden use data, call people, and
Yeah.
etc.
Interestingly, the MM wave stuff that MKBHD talked about in his video is very similar in the sense that basically because it doesn't penetrate very far at all, distance-wise, or through buildings or whatever, the idea basically is to just blanket the city with tons of these sort of like. So the tower that he was standing under was actually just sort of some equipment at the top of a telephone pole, rather than being like a gigantic tower like you see with the 4G towers. So the idea is much smaller sort of installations, but just a lot more of them. And then the other, I guess, advantage to this mmWave thing is that it has the ability to control the receiver, the phone, in a way to sort of let it very quickly jump between towers. And so again, if you have a ton of them and they're really close together, and you've blanketed the whole city with towers, with these little mini towers, and your phone can switch really quickly, then to you the experience is fairly seamless. Like it just sort of you just jump from tower to tower, and you've got nice fast speeds and stuff. But the problem is you have to blanket a whole city with equipment, and it's clearly that is something that, even though it sounds like Verizon is excited about that in the United States, they haven't done. It's hard to do because they only have 35 cities in the whole country that even have this technology installed to a sufficient degree. So it's like, why are we talking about this now when it sounds like really, to get it to be actually good, it's going to take what, 3, 5, 6 years before they've put enough of those mini towers up to make a difference.
Yeah, that's a good point. That said, I feel like we've used as much of our episode talking about 5G as Apple used for their keynote. So let's get into the other new features of the iPhone, which is, like every year, new cameras.
Right.
Anyone excited for Dolby Vision recording at 4K 60?
If you get
No, just me.
the Max, right? Is it just the Max, or is it on
The
both?
Pro.
The Pro, okay.
The
Pro.
And the non-pros get 4K 30 Dolby Vision recording.
Right. And officially the first cameras ever in the world to record in Dolby Vision, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
so actual film industry cameras, they don't record in any sort of format. It's just raw output from the sensor, essentially, and then you process that separately. Now, the camera can give you processed output, but it's just for viewing. Like, you connect a monitor to it so you can see what the camera sees.
Right.
That's all it's used for. Otherwise, it
makes
will
sense.
just copy what the sensor sees onto a frame buffer, onto an SSD, and that is how modern film cameras work. And now, one benefit that a real camera has as opposed to our phone cameras is they have a huge amount of degree in terms of what kind of light capture they have. So they're capturing the darkest areas and the brightest areas, and they're not clipping. Whereas on the phone, you have to make a judgment at filming time where you want that window to be, and you can't really change it after the fact. That said, the quality that you're getting out of the phone, like what you see is what you get pretty much, is high quality. Like you are getting a significantly higher quality than most like professional cameras that don't cost $100,000. And the fact that it can go ahead and process directly in Dolby Vision is, to say, amazing.
Yeah.
Like most movies, you record in 6K or 8K, and then you process everything in 2K, and then you literally stretch the movie up to 4K. You don't even use the original assets that were used in the filming. So if people are just using their phone to film at 4K, even 24, 30, 60, whatever, I think that is going to like really push how movies are made, especially since the camera's only this big.
Right.
Like it's a teensy tiny little
That's
thing.
insane.
You can have
Yeah.
as many of them as you need. You're not processing a whole bunch of raw footage that takes petabytes for like each production.
Right.
I think that is really going to change things. That said, you need to make decisions at filming time like you used to need to with film, right?
Right.
You needed to commit. This is what you're going to get. You can't change it afterwards.
Right.
And I think that's the one downside.
But I bet that's in some ways made filmmakers a little bit like lazy, right? When they just like, let me just have it just collect
course.
all the bits possible, and I'll just make all my choices later. Then it allows you to be potentially a little bit less intentional with what you're doing. Whereas if you have to make
It gives more creative freedoms. It's not
sure.
lazy.
I mean, you know, both, right? I think both can be true. Like, it is true that probably gives you more freedom, but it also is true that it can, in an undisciplined way, can make you lazy. So interesting. And I think what's really cool, as somebody who was a complete film nerd pretty much for all of middle school and all of high school, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a film director. And then I became an adult and realized that I wanted to, you know, like not eat ramen for the rest of my life. So I decided to get a job that had a higher chance of you know, being, you know, lucrative or whatever. Not that you can't be rich and famous for being a film director, but it's just a lot harder. But what the point here is, like, if I was 15 right now and I could convince my parents to, you know, either buy me or let me buy with my own hard-earned money working at McDonald's, like a new, you know, Pro Max iPhone that could record in 4K 60 Dolby Vision, imagine the stuff that I could create as an amateur filmmaker that just, you know, in 2000 when I was in high school was like
Impossible.
Totally
Out of your
impossible.
reach.
Yeah, totally impossible, right? So pretty amazing. Kind of the democratization of the tech allows then a lot more creative freedom for the people who want to create, but maybe can't, like you said, can't afford a $100,000 camera.
So
And
I'll be the counterweight to this discussion and say that I see most of my pictures and videos on my phone.
Right.
So as long as the quality is great on my phone, I don't care if it's Dolby or not, if it's 4K or 8K.
Yeah.
As long as it looks amazing on my now 12 mini, which is the next topic, I guess. I'm happy with the camera. As long
Yeah.
as it looks amazing there, I'm happy.
Yeah, one nice thing about recording in 4K is you can zoom on your phone and see instantly more detail.
Right.
Now, that's actually a downside, I think, to Apple sticking with 12 megapixel sensors this whole time, is you're limited to seeing it on your phone. If you blow it up on your 5K iMac, all of a sudden you start seeing the noise and you start seeing the pixels and like forget about printing that out very large.
Right.
Like you can print it out to a decent size, but if you wanted to do something like larger than life, the iPhone is unfortunately not the tool that's going to capture that level of detail for that instance. But for almost everything else, it's amazing. Now, there have been some size changes to this year's iPhones, as Fernando is very excited about. The iPhone 11 Pro became a little bit bigger when it became the iPhone 12 Pro.
Just a little bit, just a tiny bit bigger.
Just a little bit. And the iPhone 12 got way smaller, finally coming back to a size that can fit in a hand. Who would have thunk that people would like that? So, Fernando, what kind of phone are you looking forward to buy?
The 12 Pro Max, of course.
Of course.
No, I'm kidding.
The 6.7 inch
After that lead up
phone. Yeah.
No, I mean, as I was reading everything about the 12 mini, like all the specs, there's a bunch of people on Twitter already posting like relative sizing of the mini. Yeah, exactly. Of the mini to all the other phones. I was like, wow, we were like everything we talked about on our last show was pretty much spot on. It's not the exact size for the of the SE, the original SE, but it's pretty damn close.
Yeah.
Like it's really, really close. And it's full screen, Touch ID, basically no compromises except on the cameras.
Right.
And I'm like, well, now I get to, if I had said again that I would eat my hat whenever iPhone, you see where I'm going, right? But it's like, that's amazing. Like that's literally the phone that I've been asking for a few years.
And what's nice is that the 12, the two 12 models, the regular and the mini, the cameras that they do have, the wide and the ultra wide, are pretty much identical to the ones that are on the Pros.
Yep.
So you get almost all the benefit. The only thing you're not getting is you don't get the telephoto lens. So if that's important to you, you're missing out on that. And then, like Dimitri said, you're getting Dolby Vision 4K 30 frames per second, not 60. I would assume. I guess it wouldn't be because of the processor, because it's the same A14. It must be maybe the RAM. I've heard that the Pros have 6 gigs of RAM and the regulars have 4. So maybe it's just a RAM constraint, or it's just a way to differentiate, like to further separate them. You're getting a pretty amazing phone in a pretty small package. The other thing that I noticed about the Mini that's kind of specific to it is that it's going to run at so all the phones are OLED now. There's no LCDs anymore, which is nice. The 12 Mini is an OLED screen, 5.4 inches, and it's going to run at a resolution that is the same as the 11 Pro and the 12 and the 12 Pro.
Yeah.
However, because it is physically smaller, they're going to do some kind of weird scaling thing with the rendering of it. The thinking is that it's going to be such high PPI that
you're not going to notice.
You're not going to notice. But it technically is going to be running at like a scaled size, so that might be noticeable, but like it might not be. So, but other than that, it seems like basically as good as the 12, just smaller.
So, what device are you going to get, Ben?
So I'm going to get the 12. I have an 11 Pro Max right now. The last time I got the big phone was the 6 Plus. Back when the 6 and 6 Plus came out, I decided to go big and got the 6 Plus. And it was fine. I didn't love it. It was a little too big. So then I ended up, for the next series of phones, went down a size. And then when they went, to the full size screen, I wanted to try the bigger screen again. So for the 11, I got the 11 Pro Max. And it's a great phone, but it is physically just bigger than I would prefer. And so I'm going to go to the 12 rather than 12 Pro. And the reason is because it's $300 less. So that's nice. But also, I don't really need the telephoto lens, and I don't really care about the Dolby Vision 60, 4K 60. And I really, really, really want the product red phone, and I haven't been able to get one. Well, I should say that's wrong to say. Have not bought the product red models that have come out so far. Partly because the first time I think they did that, they brought out the model like 6 months after the original launch of that model phone, and I just didn't wait. And then after that, it was always because they put them on like the less capable version of the iPhone, and I want the good one. Like I want the one that's as good as I can get. So I've been sort of living in like the space gray or the silver world. I got the green this time, mostly just because it was literally a different color than the ones that they had already offered, and I like it. And the blue is nice. I like them. Is it marine or Pacific blue? Pacific blue. I like it. I think it's nice. But man, that product red, I've wanted one for like a couple of cycles, and I just don't really see any downside to the 12 over the 12 Pro that I care about. So it's like I'm gonna get the one that I want. I'm gonna get and the other thing too is I've been rocking the 11 Pro Max without a case for like a little over a month, and it's both terrifying and also really cool to not have a case on it. And so I'm planning on doing the same thing with the 12 because I want to see because people are like, oh, colors don't matter because you just put a case on it, right? Which yes, that's true.
Magnetic case now.
But I want to see the phone, so I'm going to try and go without. And I heard, and I'm super excited about MagSafe, and I heard that PopSocket is working on a PopSocket version that its backing is actually going to work with the MagSafe magnets, so that it's not permanent on your phone. And that's really kind of been my complaint about like going no case, but with a PopSocket, is that it interferes with like charging and putting it in a dock and whatever. But if I can just snap the PopSocket off the phone and stick it in the charger or put it on the wireless charge pad, golden. So that's the plan, is a red 12, hopefully with a PopSocket magnetic once that comes out.
You see, Apple, you just had to come out with a red iPhone 12 Pro Max, and Ben would have just gone for that one instead. But it's like you went for the $300 cheaper one because you didn't have red on that.
You didn't have red. I mean, it's a silly reason to pick, but like you gotta have a reason, right? So what do you
like?
Dimitri,
honestly, if they yes,
what are you gonna get? What's your model of choice? Well, I should preface that by saying, a couple days ago you were like, I'm not gonna get a phone. So what's changed, and what are you gonna get?
Well, what's changed is Dolby Vision recording. I am like endlessly fascinated by, and I always want to get a new phone, mostly because of new cameras. Like I always just want to have the newest camera because my pictures are gonna get older and older and like crappier and crappier looking throughout the years. So if I can at least keep up with the times, then it won't look so outdated so quickly. That said, I really, really like the small one, and I really, really am happy that they don't have any compromises. So what we decided to do is my wife and I are both going to get, together we're going to get a small one, a mini, and an 11 Pro. And we're not decided who is taking... 12. Sorry, a 12 mini and a 12 Pro. And we're not decided who's going to use which one yet. So we're going to like trial it out. And whoever's happy with whichever one, that's the one we're going to essentially keep for the next year or two. So I will get the best cameras because my wife is always attached to me in some way. So I can always steal her phone to use the best cameras if she ends up with that one. Or we end up with the smallest device that we can play around with as developers to see how like that impacts things. But also have like a more sane small phone that you can then go ahead and use. So that's what I'm going to do probably.
That's like a great plan. I mean, that gives you, an ability to play with sort of both different new interesting parts about the phone, the cameras and the small size. It sounds like there's very little downside there.
Definitely benefits of being married and getting your spouse like really into technology. Those one few times that it works so well.
Nice. Okay. So we've got two minis, a 12 Pro, and a red 12. So now we have to just figure out what Johnny and what Spencer are getting, and then we'll have the whole crew.
Yeah, they just need to get every color, right? And then we can have the whole collection.
We can have everybody represented. Yep. Every color and every size.
Okay, this episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Super Easy Timer. Super Easy Timer is a quick and easy to use timer for your Mac. It's completely text-based, so you can type in English what you want, 20 minutes or 5 p.m., hit enter, and instantly start a timer. The timer understands English text to create, update, and start a new timer. You can quickly change an active countdown, and while it's still counting down. There are simple keyboard shortcuts to reset or pause, no menus, no sliders, just use English to control your timer. We want to thank Super Easy Timer for sponsoring our show. Search for Super Easy Timer on the Mac App Store to give it a try. Now that we've gone through our topics, it's time for Complete the Code, where we quiz our listeners on your knowledge of Swift, Apple, and all things development. Ben, can you take it away?
Sure. For last week's topic or challenge, we have a winner. Once again, it's John Bash. John must be watching our Twitter feed and we're waiting to respond because he often gets it right. So John wrote in answer to last week's prompt, it's 3 steps. Nest this enum within the processing coordinator in an extension or in the original declaration. Step 2, name the enum error. And step 3, change the error protocol conformance to swift.error, and that will solve the problem. So if you want to see that prompt, take a look in the show notes or look on the screen if you're watching the video version. And for this week's prompt, we've got a struct person that conforms to the custom string convertible protocol. We have a name mutable property that defaults to an empty string, and an unknown twin mutable property of type optional person. The init is private and does nothing, but there is a static factory method called makeTwins that returns a tuple of 2-person objects by instantiating 2-person objects and assigning them to be each other's twins. Finally, a description computed property prints the name of the receiver's twin using optional chaining and the nil closing operator to handle the nil properly. What sort of crash could easily occur with this code? So if you want to take a look at that, look at the the chapter art in the podcast. You're listening to it on a podcast player and on the screen if you're watching the video. Tweet at us with the complete the code hashtag, and if you get it right, we'll shout you out in next week's episode. You're muted, Dimitri.
And you don't have to wait for us to tweet the prompt on Twitter and then reply to that. You can totally jump the gun using the complete the code hashtag and get that answer faster than John next time.
Yeah.
That said, we were talking a bit and we decided that we would go through all the winners for all the complete the codes throughout the year and pick one of them via like some sort of raffle to join us as a fellow completionist to go through an episode and talk about topics and things like that. So not at all an interview, just a guest completionist to join us and have fun. So if you want to participate in that, be sure to try to win at least one code completion, complete the code. That way we can have your name in the hypothetical hat that Fernando will eat. So with all that out of the way, it's time for Compiler Error, a segment where I get to test my fellow completionists' knowledge about Swift, Apple, and all things development. So I actually have a theme today, and that theme is first-party open-source Swift projects. So these are Swift projects that Apple has that are part of the Swift server working group and other parts of Swift that are not part of the standard library. So let's go through them. Number 1, just introduced this month, Swift Algorithms is a new package that makes complex sequence and collection algorithm implementations available, which wouldn't otherwise fit in with the standard library. So number 2, a foundational library to make many server-side Swift initiatives. Swift Neo exposes high-level building blocks for interacting with non-blocking I/O, such as files, streams, and datagrams. Number 3, built on top of Swift Neo, Swift Metrics is a package primarily intended for web analytics that makes it easy to collect data from your server application in a privacy-conscious way. And number 4, re-implementing much of the functionality URL session provides, Async HTTP Client is a high-performance HTTP client for Swift, actively maintained by the Swift Server Work Group. So, Fernando, why don't you go first?
These are interesting. I know they did just introduce Swift algorithms. I just saw the news in passing. I didn't dive deep into it, so I don't know if that's true or not. Like, it may be that it makes simple sequences. and collection
You've played
algorithms.
this game before.
Exactly. Uh, Swift Neo. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I've seen it a
I believe
lot.
Neo.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think that one's the my spider sense is tingling when I look at number two because it exposes high level building blocks. I don't think they're high level building blocks. I think they're low level building blocks that should be used to build high level web applications. And Dimitri's poker face is not telling me anything. That's really good, Dimitri. uh,
That's just a stream pausing.
Yeah.
yeah. um, Swift metrics, I think I've heard of it. I think it makes sense. And re-implementing URL session absolutely makes sense because you want Swift to have a version of HTTP that's available to other platforms like Linux and Windows, and URL session is not.
I should
Ah,
clarify URL session is part of the Foundation framework, which is available on all Swift platforms.
interesting. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, why are you cheating? giving something away.
Still, I think that makes sense for reasons I will not say here. So I'm just gonna go with number two. I don't
Number
think it's
two.
high level building blocks. Yeah.
All right,
Okay,
so
Ben?
I
away,
was
Ben.
pretty heavily leaning towards four only because I hadn't heard of it yet. It makes sense, but I also feel like it's something that Dimitri could have made up that sounds reasonable, but just hasn't, that might happen in the future, but hasn't happened yet. I did hear about Swift algorithms. That first one sounds reasonable. Swiftio, I also have heard about. I have not heard of Swift metrics, but again, those were the two that I was kind of like, I don't know. They could be either one of them could be made up. But once Fernando laid out his case for Swift Neo, for it not being wrong that it exists, but being wrong that the way that it is described as a high level building block is inappropriate, that it really should be for lower level stuff and is kind of used as a basis to build higher level libraries on top of. I think that sounds right to me because when I have done literally no research into any of these things, but when I heard about Swift Neo, what I heard from everyone was like, oh, this is going to enable things like, for example, redoing some stuff in Vapor to make the networking that happens in
Yep.
Vapor easier, being lower level and using it as a building block. So I feel like I'm pretty swayed by Fernando's argument, and I'm just going to go with two. So we're either both right or we're both wrong.
Yes.
Will it be a sweep
Solidarity.
in either direction? Okay, so this would have been a perfect one for Spencer to join. Too bad he couldn't join us this week.
Oh, yeah.
Because he would have known probably one or two of these off the top of his head. But let's go ahead and pick the ones, go through the ones that you all agree with. So let's start with number one. You just introduced this month, Swift Algorithms is indeed a package that makes complex sequencing collection algorithm implementations available, which wouldn't otherwise fit in with the standard library. So they specifically said these are extra algorithms that don't necessarily are not super common, but if you need to use them, here is a high performance implementation that does everything right. So you don't need to think about that in the classic Apple fashion. That said, the methods are geared towards the algorithm themselves rather than the result of the algorithm. So there is that. There is also a Swift Algorithms Club. I believe I'm getting that right, which is a project Ray Wendelich. Ray Wendelich. How do you say his name? I don't know. Leave us a comment down below with how you say his name. So he has a repo that has tons of Swift algorithms or algorithms implemented in Swift. So if you are studying up for an interview at a company that uses outdated practices, that is definitely a resource to go check out. But more importantly, if you're actually trying to solve a problem, don't reinvent an algorithm that already exists. Go look up to see if there is one, and then check that repo to see if there is an implementation that works for you. So let's go to number 4, re-implementing much of the functionality URL session provides. Async HTTP client is a high-performance HTTP client for Swift. And now I find it kind of interesting that it re-implements URL session for the most part, and it does so with a different API. Now, why do you think that might be? Why would they want to re-implement it? Well, you could just use URL session on the server side, right? So
More
the
server
reason
B.
why So the reason is because it's built on top of Swift Neo, as are most other Swift
Ah.
server
That makes
specific
sense.
things. So it's all integrated using the same resources that are available, and you don't like allocate extra threads just for dispatch queue and things like that. So that's the real
That makes
reason Swift
sense.
Neo exists, is because it implements essentially event loops per thread in a very similar way, but different than dispatch queue, which does not have the same level of priorities as macOS does on Linux, because it's not implemented by the kernel. It's implemented as a user-facing library. So in order to squeeze out all the performance, it goes and re-implements all those things. And we'll return to that one. So that makes number 4 true. Async HTTP client is totally a thing, and it's actively maintained, and I contributed to it because I needed some
Nice.
functionality, and it was not there. So if you need an open source project to contribute to, these are all perfect. They are all in the infancy stage. They are all small. They are all well maintained and well documented. So go ahead and jump in if you want to jump into something. Now that leaves us with 2 and 3. Let's start with number 2. So a foundational library to make server-side Swift initiatives. Swift Neo exposes a high-level building blocks for interacting with non-blocking I/O, such as files, streams, and datagrams. So Fernando, since you mentioned that Neo would not be a high-level set of building blocks, but low-level building blocks, what would high-level building blocks for interacting with streams and datagrams look like to you?
That's a good question. I don't know. What I do know, like that, the reason I thought about low level is because Swift is starting from the like from the very bottom. So and the server is in a weird spot where they sort of like they're ahead in some places and they're like on again on step 0 on some other places. So I don't know. Low level to me means something like literally like blocking at the file level system, and then high level means like copying files, things like that. So building on top of the actual blocking low level streams. Am
Okay.
I what am I?
So
Tell me if
I
I'm too.
see where you're getting at. That said, Swift Neo definitely has some very nice APIs for dealing asynchronously with file I/O, streams, and datagrams. And I would personally like, if you ever interact with those low level, like the actual low level C APIs, I would say that's horrendously low level. Whereas Swift Neo is like a walk in the park in terms of giving you all the tools that you need to do that properly. So I would consider that high level just from that point of view. That said, if you do use Vapor, you interact with Neo quite a bit. You use futures and promises, and those are all features that are exposed through Vapor. Vapor is just going and using the channel and Bootstrap that Neo provides, but that's all it's using. Like Vapor's implementation of actually getting an HTTP server running is quite simple in the grand scheme of things, and that's because Neo is a fairly high level framework that just lets you run an HTTP2 server. It has all the building blocks for that. So that means that one is a code completion, unfortunately. Sorry, Ben, for going with the flow there.
So, so we're losing
I,
because of a difference of opinion of what the word high level means.
yes, yes, that's what I was gonna say. I will. I don't know. I'll raise hell on Twitter because because the official repo has low-level protocol implementations and high-level implementations. And the low-level implementations are just like you say, where like another layer exposes Swift Neo's
Mhm.
implementation, and then the high-level implementations are where they don't expose. So I would feel better if we called this a draw.
Okay. That said, you both failed miserably to snuff out number 3.
Yeah.
So built on top of Swift Neo, Swift Metrics, number 1 is not at all built on top of Swift Neo.
Ah,
And number 2, it's not at all a library intended for web analytics. It is meant for counting,
Ah.
and to provide a signal that your server is essentially still live, and to get very basic metrics regarding how your process is doing. So, although I guess you could deeply contrive that to make web analytics work, you would be doing a lot of contriving to get that just the way you want it, and it's not at
Agreed.
all the package for that.
But it's
But
server
yeah, it
health, right?
doesn't.
It's not how
Yeah,
does your website
definitely.
perform as far as clicks and whatever. It's like, is your server alive, right? That's what it's doing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's primarily there as a interface to plug into other backends that would actually report that in some way. So it's just an API surface for the most part. So it doesn't even import Neo as a dependency or anything like that. So that one was totally, utterly wrong. So
Man, if
I guess you
Spencer
get
were
10%.
here, somebody would have won this.
What I really like about number 3 is that you mixed up Apple and Swift. Because I was like, oh, of course they would do something to collect analytics in a privacy conscious way. Apple would. Swift doesn't care about it.
Right.
I don't think.
Yeah.
So I really like that. Really, really like that.
That said, these are all first-party open source projects. So these are all owned and maintained by Apple. That's why I didn't include something like Vapor, which is not maintained by Apple. Though it is part of the Swift Server Workgroup, which is a separate, independent thing, which Vapor is a member of. So that said, that's all we have for compiler error today. So as always, I wanted to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. As you notice, this is 2 weeks in a row where we are not live. We are trying out different software, and it is making our lives a ton easier. So if you miss us being live, let us know on Twitter, and we'll see what we can do. But if no one misses it in particular, then we will continue experimenting and see what kind of works best for us going forward. So once again, I want to give my thanks to Fernando, who is at From Junior to Senior. That's FROMJRTOSR on Twitter. And Ben, who is at Ferrous Guy, that's FERROUSGUY, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol, DIMITRIBOUNIOL, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya.
Bye.